Hey everyone, Jill Chacha here with an adorable update for this episode, which I wrote back in February and am recording on March 7th. Serendipitously, this just so happens to be the day some big news dropped about the very topic we're about to discover ourselves, and I couldn't pass up the chance to tell you about it. In sum, 2 tiny marsupials thought to have gone extinct 6,000 years ago, yes, you heard me, 6,000 years ago, have been found alive in the remote rainforests of the Vogelkop Peninsula in Papua New Guinea, which is located at the far west end of the island. Papua New Guinea itself makes another appearance in this episode, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's quickly talk about the 2 latest members of an exclusive club known as Lazarus taxa, or Lazarus species. The pygmy long-fingered possum and the ring-tailed glider. And for the love of God, I need you to pick up your phone to use your longest finger to tap on today's post for a photo of them. After hyperventilating from all the cuteness, you'll notice that, quote, the pygmy long-fingered possum is a boldly striped marsupial with a remarkable adaptation. 1 digit on each hand is twice the length of the next longest finger. This species appears to have vanished from Australia during the Ice Age, the geological epoch when iconic megafauna such as the marsupial lion also became extinct. The second discovery, the ring-tailed glider, is the nearest living relative of the Australian greater glider. Just I'll say that 3 times fast. Smaller than its Australian cousins, with unfurried ears and a strong prehensile tail, the ring-tailed glider forms lifelong pair bonds and only raises 1 young annually. Like greater gliders, the species nests in hollow trees in the tallest forest trees and faces threats from logging, end quote, from the Australian Museum. And it was actually that museum's research team that made the rediscovery, including Professor Tim Flannery, an Australian Museum Distinguished Visiting Fellow, and Professor Christopher Helgen, President and CEO of Bishop Museum. These beautiful nerds joined forces with local researchers and elders of the island who had what they believed were photographs of these species. Turns out, they were right. And it only took 6,000 years. Oh, and if you're wondering how these squeezable floofs can be related to Australian species, turns out Vogelkop is an ancient piece of the Australian continent that became incorporated into the island of Papua New Guinea millions of years ago. Now, if this warmed your heart and cleansed your timeline, I have great news. For real. This episode has 3 more rediscoveries, each more uplifting than the last. I think we need this. So please, stay tuned. Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting, the Psych Gotcha edition. Today is episode 274. Let's talk about Lazarus species, animals once thought to be extinct but are later rediscovered. My friends, would you look at the date? If you are listening to this tasty morsel on the day of its release on April 2nd, then you know we have just found ourselves in the creamy middle between April Fool's Day and Easter Sunday. This is a coincidence I could not pass up. Here's what I mean. If you also just so happen to be listening in what's considered a Western country, you're probably more than familiar with April 1st, a day which has traditionally been designated as the day to bust out your biggest, best, and honestly most traumatic practical jokes, hoaxes, and pranks on unassuming friends and neighbors. Now, as to how in the holy hell this all started, it's anyone's educated guess. And the editors over at the History Channel have a few ideas. Quote, some historians speculate that April Fool's Day dates back to 1582, when France switched from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, as called for by the Council of Trent in 1563. In the Julian calendar, the new year began with the spring equinox around April 1st. People who were slow to get the news or failed to recognize that the start of the new year had moved to January 1st and continued to celebrate it during the last week of March through April 1st became the butt of jokes and hoaxes and were called April Fools. Historians have also linked April Fool's Day to festivals such as Hilaria, Latin for joyful, which was celebrated in ancient Rome at the end of March by followers of the cult Cybele. It involved people dressing up in disguises and mocking fellow citizens and even magistrates, and was said to be inspired by the Egyptian legend of Isis, Osiris, and Seth. There's also speculation that April Fool's Day was tied to the vernal equinox, or the first day of spring in the Northern Hemisphere, when Mother Nature fooled people with changing, unpredictable weather. End quote. And you know what? As for me, that last one has my vote. It was snowing 2 weeks ago, and now it's almost 80 in New York. Okay, anyway, Easter Sunday. What's up with that? For those into the big JC, it's the most significant Christian holiday, celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ 3 days after his crucifixion. AKA, Christians believe this is when Jesus rose from the dead. In the Bible, though, there are several other examples of folks pulling off what's considered revivifications, a sexy word for returning to mortal life, and one I'll be using for when I bounce back from a hangover. One of these other folks includes Lazarus. Today, we are going to combine all of these themes and talk about 3 creatures that were thought to be extinct thanks to habitat and ecological destruction and climate change, but were rediscovered by researchers who had a sneaky suspicion they might still be around. Or maybe revivified, who's to say? Each of the animals I'm about to cover right the fuck now have not been seen for decades, one of them for nearly a century. But thanks to some hard work, they've been caught on camera in the last 3 years. These are the feel-good, ad-free news stories we've been waiting for, and I can't wait to share this special episode. In the meantime, hi, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my mysterious business goose. To begin, let's start big, shall we? And honestly, what's bigger than Australia? So please, join me, will you, where the Pasco River meets the Kanju-Nagachi Wenlock, back in an unrecognizable world, 2017. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who may be hesitant about stepping in an exposed foot on this continent and are like, what, Pasco what now? Don't worry. 1, I assure you the creature we're about to gaze upon is a gentle ball of puff, and 2, all you need to do is imagine Australia. Thank you. Point to the upper right-hand corner, and there is the state of Queensland, who, like its namesake, is wearing a long pointy hat. If you move your finger just before the tip and make a very large square, this area is home to the Kuku-Iu Northern Kanju people, who are, I am happy to announce, in the process of reoccupying their traditional lands. Approximately 840,000 hectares is divided among some 30 families from 30 Kuku-Iu Northern Kanju clan estates who, according to kanju-nagachi.com.au, have a number of goals, including, quote, improving the health, social, cultural, spiritual, and economic well-being of indigenous people, and to protect local, national, and global biological and biocultural diversity, end quote. Well, these are by no means easy tasks, but by 2017, one whisper of a sign signaled they were on the right path. As reported by the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, a blur of what resembled a quoll was captured on a trail camera set and reviewed by rangers of a nearby town called Chulangan. It is an understatement when I say I bet they thought they were losing it. I mean, yes, it's true. The northern quoll was once widespread across northern and eastern Australia, but their populations have collapsed since the 1930s, when toxic cane toads were brought to the country to help deal with a sugarcane pest problem, aptly called the cane beetle. Surprisingly, this plan failed. But don't worry. Those toads completely thrived, creating a terrible effect on local ecology. And they weren't alone in doing so. Feral predators, including cats, were also introduced. And when you combine that with what the AWC calls inappropriate fire regimens and habitat loss, you get an animal that hasn't been seen in 80 years. You heard me. 80 years. That in itself is devastating. But when you look at this little quoll's face, your heart will shatter into even more pieces. Oh God, please drop whatever face you're holding right now and pick up your phone. Tap on today's post over at the socials and brace yourself. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay if you exploded. I did too. This is basically a squirrel wearing a white polka-dotted bodysuit. And look at those big round eyes. And pink nose. What a little shit. It's just too cute. Okay, but officially, let's talk about officially. The AWC describes the northern quoll as the smallest of the 4 Australian quoll species, with a body length between 9 and 14 inches and weighing up to 1.1 kilos or a bit over 2 pounds. Males are slightly larger than females, but both have reddish-brown fur with a creamy underside and white spots on its back and rump, and a pointed snout that you just want to boop. Northern quolls are nocturnal predators of invertebrates, but they also eat small mammals, reptiles, birds, and fruit. When it comes to sexy times, that is when things get Australian trademark deadly. Yeah, this took a turn. Quote, males expend considerable energy fighting other males during the breeding season and do not survive to breed a second year. Females den in hollow trees, hollow logs, or rock crevices where they raise a litter of up to 8 young. And they may live for 2 or 3 years afterwards. End quote. So they live fast and die young, looking horrendously adorable as they do it. But again, these polka dots haven't been positively identified for 80 years. So this scant footage was making waves and stirring up the question, is it possible? Is the quoll still with us? Well, join me now, will you, at the Pickaninny Plains Wildlife Sanctuary, a 165,000-hectare sanctuary located on the northern Kanju country, and it's jointly owned by the AWC and the Tony and Lizette Lewis Foundation. It was here last year. Sanctuary manager Nick Stock was location scouting from a damn helicopter looking for remote places he believed a quoll would call home. Spotting an isolated rocky outcrop, he said, this must be the place. And he set up a single camera equipped with night vision. I'll say that again, 1 camera. And y'all, guess what? In February of 2025, they saw this. Please, drop the wheel of your helicopter and pick up your phone. Swipe past the color photo of a quoll and you will see what manager Nick Stock actually saw. I will give you a second. Yeah, those images are stills from a video taken in the pitch black of night, and there is a quoll hopping right along and climbing up some goddamn rocks. It's unmistakable. And if you just smiled, so did Dr. Helena Stokes, an AWC wildlife ecologist. Quote, it was fantastic. It was a fantastic surprise. After years of no sightings, to finally confirm a northern quoll on the sanctuary is hugely uplifting for our team. It reinforces the importance of persistence, good science, and managing threats across large landscapes. End quote, she said in an interview for the AWC's website. And my friends, I have even better news. The site goes on to report that the team's location scouting has confirmed that the outcrop has remained largely unburnt, a result of AWC's long-term fire management, and so far it shows no evidence of feral cats on surveillance cameras. Manager Nick followed up with a statement that we are all feeling right now. Quote, every rediscovery matters. Just when we were close to giving up, this little quoll reminds us why we keep searching and why protecting these landscapes at scale is essential. End quote. Well, God damn it, Nick. You are spot on. No pun intended. Well, our avalanche of tender emotions is only getting started, and we don't have to go very far for our next rediscovery. Please, make a sharp left from Australia to China. Point to the southern border and draw a peninsula. Thank you. At the center of that peninsula is Thailand, and if you will, give it a bit of a tail. Perfect. At the tip of the tail is Thailand's Princess Surindhorned Wildlife Sanctuary, where Ratapan Patanarangsan, Conservation Program Manager for Panthera Thailand, was dabbing their forehead, working tirelessly alongside colleagues from Thailand's Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, or DNP for short. Since 2006, Panthera Thailand has been sweating with DNP, racing against the clock to monitor and protect the majestic cats of Thailand, including tigers to leopards to small cats. Small cats, like the aptly named flat-headed cat who hasn't been seen since 1995, 30 years ago. Now, I can see your head from here. Your face says, I'm distracted by the name of this cat. What, flat-headed cat? Yeah, I know. And the numbers didn't register, so I get it. So let's talk about what this cat looks like. Let's get that out of the way so we can focus. What can I say? If you've ever seen those medieval cat drawings, I swear that's what they resemble, and I say this with all of my heart. They are so unusual looking that they circle all the way back to being precious. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, just imagine the body of a cat, but on its head, add a human face that's been painted to look like a cat's face. Yeah, that sounds like a lot, and if you need a visual, no problem, there's a few on our socials. You will see it has a very distinct flat forehead that cascades into a pair of eyes that are enormous and very human-like. The rest of it, though, I promise you'll just want to cuddle. Fully grown, they're only 4 pounds and 15 to 20 inches long. They're found on Sumatra, Borneo, and on the Malayan Peninsula, where we are right now, extending into southern Thailand. But, like I mentioned, they haven't been seen in 3 decades. Despite this, Radapan and the gang were not giving up. In 2024, they scattered the park with camera traps, set to go off whenever a creature passed in front of the lens. In that entire year, they actually caught 13 images of what is no doubt medieval cats. I mean, flat-headed cats. The raging success led the team to reinstall the cameras in 2025, and guess what? They scored another 16 images. And it gets even better. In the mix was photographic evidence of a female flat-headed cat with her cub, demonstrating the population is still reproducing. The cub can be seen plodding along on our socials. Look at the little feet. Look at them. Now, I made it seem easy, that the team just scattered cameras to get all this footage, but that's not true. It was a painstaking process. In an email to Laura Simmons of IFL Science, Radapan noted, quote, camera traps had been deployed in the past, but they failed to detect these cats. The key factor was the choice of deployment locations. Drawing on years of experience from fishing cat research, Panthera researchers were able to identify suitable sites for camera placement, which ultimately led to the successful detection and photographic evidence of the flat-headed cat. End quote. Yes, indeed, the team made an unconventional decision. Use what they knew about fishing cats, or semi-aquatic wild cats native to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and West Bengal in India, to find this one. And it worked. Speaking of unconventional, our final rediscovery. Attenborough's long-beaked echidna. As you can tell by its title, 1, it's named after everyone's favorite grandpa, Sir David Attenborough, and 2, this thing has a beak. Kind of. To be honest, it's all over the place, but once again, I say this with every ounce of my heart. They are a hot mess that I am infatuated with, and soon you will be too if you have not heard of this spiky poofball up until right now. In an interview with NPR, James Kempton, an Oxford University biologist who led the expedition we're about to beak plant into ourselves, describes this animal as one with, quote, the spines of a hedgehog, the snout of an anteater, and the feet of a mole, end quote. Yeah, I said it's wild, and I meant it. But that is only the beginning. It was first discovered and collected in 1961 and has not been seen since. From that single specimen, we know the following. Quote, this curious little mammal is only one of 3 species in its genus. Like all echidnas, of which there are not many, long-beaked echidnas are monotremes, meaning they are an ancient order of egg-laying mammals found only in Australia and New Guinea. In fact, aside from the platypus, they are the only mammals on Earth to do so. And that's not the only strange thing about them. They are also covered in protective spines made of keratin, and have a long, protuberant snout with which they forage for insects. Although all echidnas are rare, this particular species has proved more elusive than most. End quote from discoverwildlife.com. Are you not already obsessed? Well, you are not alone. James Kempton, who I mentioned just before, fell down an echidna hole like no other researcher since its finding and disappearance. As to the exploration he spearheaded, I am absolutely thrilled to play the following video over at the Tube of You, Rediscovering Attenborough's Long-Beaked Echidna, Expedition Cyclops to Indonesia and New Guinea. Feel free to search that very long title and watch along. In it, James tells us how this project even started, one of my favorite things about it, by the way, how this project evolved and snowballed into an intercontinental collaboration, and why we need such endeavors. And please, 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 don't let James's ridiculously calm British demeanor fool you. This expedition was so profoundly successful, it not only found our little buddy, but it became the first comprehensive assessment of invertebrate, reptile, amphibian, and mammal life in the Cyclops Mountains of New Guinea. Meaning they found a ton of shit, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's have a 4-minute listen to James Kempton, Oxford University biologist.
My name is James Kempton. I'm a researcher at the University of Oxford, a biologist, in fact. And I'm at Explore because I was speaking here. I was speaking on an expedition that I led in Indonesia and New Guinea. Expedition Cyclops is the name of the expedition. And it was an expedition that brought together geologists, biologists, conservationists, social scientists, and indigenous collaborators in a big project whose two main aims were to rediscover a species of animal that hasn't been seen for over 60 years, called Attenborough's long-beaked echidna, and to test hypotheses on how these mountains formed and what impact that formation had on the modern biodiversity of New Guinea, which is the most biodiverse island on the planet. And these mountains were probably once islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So we're very curious about how the fact that these islands came towards the Australian continental plate, collided with them and formed mountains, how that process has influenced the modern biodiversity. Whether, for example, those islands contained many endemic species millions of years ago that, through this process of slow continental drift, brought endemic species to New Guinea millions of years ago. The origin story of the expedition is somewhat humble, actually. I don't know if people have a conception, an idea that expeditions are born of very grand occasions. In my case, it wasn't. I was speaking with a friend in a pub, and he mentioned to me Attenborough's long-beaked echidna and the fact that it hadn't been seen for very many years. And it was kind of a casual conversation. It would be very interesting to go look for that one day, wouldn't it? And I don't think he appreciated the obsession that would develop in my mind to actually trying to achieve that. And once you have an initial idea, which can, as I say, come from very humble origins, the research that you do about making that idea a reality often brings you into a realm of other ideas and knowledge that you previously hadn't delved into, and which inspires many more ideas. So once I started to research about the Attenborough's long-beaked echidna and its history in the Cyclops Mountains, I learned more about the Cyclops Mountains, and I learned more about the biodiversity of New Guinea more broadly, and I learned about the historical and geographic context of the island. And so I have many more ideas now about kinds of expeditions I could do in New Guinea, but it focused my mind on the echidna and then this idea that the Cyclops were once islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that collided with the Australian continental plate, forming these mountains. The idea that maybe species on islands in the middle of the Pacific were brought passively to New Guinea, and that's what's influenced its modern-day biodiversity as an important factor. It's a very tantalizing idea, but I wouldn't have reached that idea and come to test this in an expedition if I hadn't first had another idea, which was about searching for the echidna. So it's about finding, I think, an initial germ, initial strand, for which you do a lot of research, which inspires more. Hopefully, one thing that people who have come to Explore today might take away from me giving my talk and my journey from originally coming to Explore is that here is a concrete example of someone who came to Explore some years ago, obtained advice, persevered, worked hard, and achieved the mission that they'd put to themselves and their team when they first came to explore. That's a concrete example. And I've spoken to several people already after my talk who've asked for specific advice in relation to that. And so hopefully people can take that advice and use it productively, and they maybe will speak in 3 years' time themselves.
Well, my friends, there you have it. A conversation in a pub led to what was called Expedition Cyclops. And my God, I need to tell you about it. If you're a long-time member of the flock, you may recall a dash of an island called Papua New Guinea, located just north of Australia. Divided in half, the left side is simply called Papa, and the right, Papua New Guinea. Next to where the two split, on the northern shore of Papa, sits this beast of a mountain. And it was here an A-team of nerds assembled, including those from the University of Oxford, the Indonesian NGO Yayasan Pelayanan Papa Nenda, yeah, I nailed that, Cenderawasih University, Papa BBK SDA, and the National Research and Innovation Agency of Indonesia. Now, mountain climbing in itself is a pain in the ass. But when you throw in venomous animals, blood-sucking leeches, malaria, earthquakes, and exhausting heat, let's just say the temptation to quit looms large. And this physical discomfort was also compounded by the fact that during the entire 4 weeks the team spent climbing over 11,000 meters, more than the height of Everest, there was no sign of our little pointy ragamuffin. Now, don't get me wrong. Within that time frame, the team did make other monumental discoveries, including Mayer's honey eater, a bird lost to science since 2008, an entirely new genus of tree-dwelling shrimp, countless new species of insects and arachnids like a blind spider, blind harvestman, and a whip scorpion. They even found a previously unknown cave system, literally by accident because one of the team members fell through its moss-covered entrance. I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. That is all impressive for sure. But what I mean to say is that the team felt that was all happenstance. The first to-do on the to-do list was rediscovering Attenborough's long-beaked echidna, and that box went unchecked. When they were ready to pack up and go home on the final day of the exhibition, I shit you not, some members of the team decided, hell, let's take a look at the last of our footage from last night. There it was, at the end of a full memory card, Attenborough's long-beaked echidna just bumbling along like, hey everybody, what's up? Okay, bye, good to see you. And then it exited the frame. I have screenshots of it walking past the camera on our socials, and I highly recommend looking at them. So, Attenborough's long-beaked echidna is not extinct, and at least one of them is doing just fine. In the meantime, as reported by ox.ac.uk, besides animal specimens, the team also collected over 75 kilos of rock samples for geological analysis. This could help answer many questions about how and when the Cyclops Mountains originally formed, as we only have one theory: when an island arc in the Pacific Ocean collided with the New Guinea mainland about 10 million years ago. This part of the study is still ongoing. And as we speak, some nerd out there with an unhealthy obsession is making plans and packing a bag, all in hopes to declare that at least one tiny creature out there is still hanging on. Watch this space. And thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, following, telling your friends not to give up. I know it's hard. I know it's so hard. But the echidna, that little son of a bitch, just wobbling out there right now as we speak. And that makes me happy. I hope it makes you happy. And a revived thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family, and please, stay interesting.